of knowledge. When I was promoted to a personal chair at Cambridge University in 1991, it was the custom to choose the title of your professorship, and I went to see the philosopher and anthropologist, sociologist, and my head of department, Ernest Gellner. And he said, "Alan, how about you call yourself the Professor of Anthropological Science?" And I thought, that's a bit strange. He said, "We're in competition with other faculties, and many of them are science faculties, and even the archaeologists call themselves a light science. And in Cambridge, that all seems to help in your battles. So it would be good for the department if you were Professor of Anthropological Science." I said, "Well, Ernest, you know and I know that anthropology is not a science, at least our kind, social anthropology, because it's not predictive, doesn't aim at universal laws, it doesn't have an experimental method, and so in its essence and spirit it doesn't seem like a science." And that's what I've been assuming all through my academic career, that there is a world of science and there is a world of arts and social sciences, and they are miles apart in method and aims. And he said, "Well, maybe that's true, but let's go for it because it's tactically a good idea." But he may also have said, "Well, Alan, think about the meaning of science where I come from Europe, because in the word itself, scientia, really means knowledge. And so science is just knowledge, and it comes from a Latin root. And so in scientia or science, more broadly in continental thought, just means a form of knowledge, which could be art, it could be music, it could be anything." And so this set me thinking. And also around that time I met an engineer, retired engineer, industrialist, Jerry Martin, and I spent time discussing this with him about the differences between his world and mine. And also he organized many science and arts seminars with philosophers and historians of science like Simon Schaffer and particularly John Zeeman, who was a physicist who had written books about what is science. And between us, and particularly Jerry, we decided we wouldn't ever use the word science about what the English take to be hard sciences. We would talk about it as reliable knowledge. It was knowledge, but it was on a continuum of reliability, which made that it was perhaps a little more reliable than some of the speculations of historians or anthropologists. But it was on a continuum. So on this continuum, you would have at one end very unpredictable and fairly unreliable forms of knowledge in the arts, and then the social sciences, and then psychology and economics and things like that, which try to aim at laws, and then moving to the natural sciences and ending up with the physical sciences and mathematics. And so I realized that it's more or less a science in that sense. And I also began to realize, and have increasingly realized, that the methods of science have nothing to do with what I thought, which was that you had an experiment in a laboratory, found something, and then you had a law. Rather than that, as Poincaré, the great mathematician, pointed out, guessing first and then testing and proving is the way that science works. So it's intuitive. And I began to realize that the scientific method is the one based basically on evolution. So you have random variations, all sorts of things happen by accident, genetic accidents and so on, and selective retention. You keep what is useful. And that is how natural selection, in the Darwinian sense, has happened over millions of years. And all that experimental laboratory science does, of the kind that Francis Bacon advocated, is to speed it up. It doesn't alter the nature of it. It says, let's build a little enclosed, specialized world and fire random variations at it. Try out lots of different things, and then if something seems to work, then you can replicate it elsewhere or again in the laboratory and see whether the correlation actually is the case. So I began to realize that this is what scientists have been doing, and that being a British positivist, empiricist sort of background, coming from that background, I'd always assumed that the world was there and you just tested it with these experiments. But it's not nearly as simple as that. It's much more the method which I later heard described of Newton, which is the hypothetical, the hypothesis first, and then inductive method. A hypothesis, then looking at facts and inducing the facts that are generated by the hypothesis, and then inducing, working out laws, and then testing it again. It's a method that also Karl Popper describes conjectures and refutations. You conjecture something, you guess something. And this is why big breakthroughs in knowledge can't be done in a logical manner, because it's a random process. You can't get to it by formal logic. You have to intuit it, and many great scientists from Einstein backwards and forwards have said that it's about guessing productively and then testing. And another thing I realized about knowledge was that it's something which is shared by all of us, the scientific method. Science in that sense of making a guess, having a hunch, having an intuition based on previous experience, and then testing it, is what we all do. So we are all scientists. If you watch a child, as I did when I was filming my granddaughter and so on, what she would do was that at the age of 1 or 2 or 3, even from earlier, she would have a guess at how A was connected to B. For example, that there was this thing that was very bright and shone, and it seemed to be warm, and she would put her hand towards it, and it was indeed warm, and if your hand got too close to it, it burnt, and this was fire. So you guessed, and the next time you saw something that looked like that, you would keep well away from it, or just the right distance from it. So children learn through the method of natural selection and intuition and guesswork, and that's how all knowledge accumulates. And that means that the old idea I had, based partly, I suppose, on C.P. Snow's famous article on the two cultures, because he was looking at Cambridge and he was saying that, the scientists and the artists, social scientists, live in different worlds, two cultures. My experience of many years in King's College and doing lots of interviews where people, particularly distinguished scientists, talked about their work, was that it wasn't like that. The scientists at a high level, once you got above the technical method, they talked in the same way about beauty and truth and experimentation. And so I'd never felt in the presence of a high-level mathematician or physicist or biologist that I was unable to communicate with these people because they were in a different culture to mine. So they may have more prestige to a certain extent in Cambridge because it's a famous science university, but they're no cleverer, and they're not using really very different methods. So the unification that I've gradually achieved in my life of knowledge, whereby we are all seeking deeper understandings of the world, and we have particular methods to do that, and different kinds of truths, but we are all on the same path. That was a nice thing to discover. Thank you.